Hi, this is Austin Wintory, and this is the Game Maker's Notebook. Today I've had the wonderful pleasure of chatting with a longtime friend, the composer Borislav Slavov. He is the music director at Larian Studios and recently shipped Baldur's Gate 3. He, prior to that, worked on Divinity Original Sin 2 and was at Crytek before that, working on games like Crysis 2 and 3. He's a fabulous musician, wonderful composer, and he's just, honest to God, one of the nicest, most optimistic, and effusively positive people I've probably ever met. Our conversation covered a lot of grounds, but really was just kind of about life, the realities of being a composer, being creative while working under stress, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was a privilege to share that couple of hours with him, and I hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Game Maker's Notebook, a podcast featuring a series of in-depth one-on-one conversations between game makers providing a thoughtful, intimate perspective on the business and craft of interactive entertainment. The Game Maker's Notebook is presented by the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, a member-driven organization dedicated to the recognition and advancement of interactive entertainment.
Off we go with Borislav Slavov, one of my most delicious names to say, or Bobby, as I feel emboldened to call you. How are you doing, my friend?
Hey, Austin, man. Once again, it's a huge pleasure. And first of all, thank you so much for inviting me and for having me here. It was a really pleasant surprise. And it was great talking to you it was 2 weeks ago on the Game Music Festival in Wrocław. When I realized that you won't be there, I was really sad because, I was talking to my friends and I was telling everyone that I'm supposed to meet my favorite composer, Austin Wintory. And when this bloody COVID madness took all over the place, I was thoroughly disappointed. But still, nevertheless, it was a great conversation. And Game Music Festival was a blast.
And I have to say, to bring our dear listeners up to speed, in Wrocław, Poland, the last 3 years now, there's been this event, the Game Music Festival, which is, I'm sure you would agree, a truly world-class event. They, especially under the constraints of COVID, but even last year where we didn't have any of that, and that's when I was there, I was blown away. I never heard of this city until they reached out to me, and then go there, and they've got this fabulous concert hall, these great the multiple orchestras. Last year they put on 3 concerts, a concert of my music, a concert of the Fumito Ueda's games, a sort of triplet of The Last Guardian, Ico, and Shadow of the Colossus, and then a third concert of the music of Jesper Kyd, mostly drawing from Assassin's Creed and Hitman. And just the whole thing blew my mind. It was unbelievably well done. So it gave me immense joy to see you the subject of a concert this year. And I watched the live stream, and I was astounded, first off, that they handled your music. Well, I want to ask you, actually, because I insisted on handling the arrangements myself on mine, and I think I'm one of the only ones to have done that because they have their own arrangers, and they like to approach it a little bit differently. So they were very gracious in letting me do it the way I wanted to do it. So, but secondarily to the fact that I was very impressed with the way they treated your music, which I love, but also as a live streamed concert with, the live direction of a multi-camera shoot and the audio fidelity of capturing the orchestra in real time, it felt like I was watching a DVD of a concert where they filmed it and they recorded it, and then later in the edit bay they constructed, a nice visual and audio presentation that takes time to prepare. The idea that this was being called live with that level of quality, I was like, it's like watching the Oscars. I mean, I was blown away. I just couldn't believe how good a job they did because, these guys, they're basically just fans, right? They're basically just
that's amazing, man. That's absolutely
big game
amazing.
nerds.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, believe it or not, these guys they do something completely different for a living. I can tell you an amusing story, fresh out of the oven, about
Oh,
this
great.
year's music festival. Can you believe that okay, first things first. So when I arrived, I went out for a dinner, and I was called by the director of the festival. He
Mhm.
wanted to tell me something very important, and it was very urgent. So I was thinking, what is going on here? I was really concerned about the news that I was going to have. And I was told that the orchestra that was having rehearsals for a few weeks with my music couldn't make it. Couldn't make it. And they couldn't make it literally 48 hours before the concert. And
Because they had to
the
come from another town? Is that?
no. It was the COVID madness. Some of the guys were in contact with deceased people due to this
Mm.
bloody COVID madness, and as a result, the whole orchestra was canceled. And the guys did a heroic deed there. You know what they did? They managed to find within 2 hours a brand new orchestra from a nearby little, really small town. They invited the guys, and they did an absolutely amazing and heroic achievement, and you witnessed this achievement.
So I did not
They
know
had,
that detail. Meaning,
yeah,
like
bro,
they
can
just
you believe it?
rehearsed. They rehearsed nonstop, I guess, from the moment
No,
they got the call.
no, absolutely no. You know, I was present to the only 3 rehearsals which happened the very same day, right before the concert itself. Can you believe this?
I mean, I have witnessed music sort of superheroism before. You know, like you record in London or you record in Los Angeles or Nashville, and you see them
Yeah,
piece together
London and
music.
LA.
And so, on the one hand, I'm not shocked, but yet even then, like even when you're at Abbey Road, it's still shocking because you just think, how is it possible? It's amazing that this is even within the realm of human capability. And more musicians, the world is just kind of growing up, it seems. And so on the one hand, I totally believe it. But at the other hand, the fact that any of it's possible for anyone, anywhere is astounding. I'm thrilled. I had no idea you were that close to the edge of disaster.
It was
Um,
so close, my friend. You cannot believe it. I mean, I was so concerned, and I was so gloomy and so down. And I honestly, I didn't believe it was possible because I was sitting there, listening to the rehearsals, and it was okay, sort of. And I remember there was a moment when I was very concerned and very, very much upset about what's going to happen. But then the miracle happens. And now that I think about it, I think that it has a lot to do with the passion of all these guys. Because when you do something out of passion, mainly when you love it with all your heart, and the driving force is not earning. I don't know. I don't want to, uh, but you know what I'm saying. These guys, on the moment the concert started, these were completely different people. A miracle happened, and I was sitting there totally blown away. I couldn't believe what was going on. Of course, there were some minor, deviations and hiccups here and there, but overall, it was something absolutely amazing and a mind blowing achievement. And speaking
well,
about the previous concerts, um I've listened them all. I've watched them all, including yours. Of course, one of my favorite. And talking about game festivals, this one and the other one in Ubeda, that the one that we met for the very first time. These are my most favorite festivals, actually,
yeah.
because
Well, no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, the guys from Poland totally share the same vision, the same passion, and the same love for video games music, like our Spanish friends from Ubeda.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I totally agree. It's a special kind of person to go to that much effort and that much headache to put together a big event where you have to sell, a few thousand tickets, and almost all the composers are being flown in from somewhere out of the country, And so,
Exactly.
you know, in some cases that means dealing with visas. In other cases, it's just the headache of travel arrangements and raising all the money to do this, and often having to raise the money from you know, investors or government grants or something, trying to explain to them the value of film music or video game music, and often those people are just looking at them going, "What in the hell are you talking about?" And purely because they think the idea of sitting back and watching an orchestra play music from, you know, Baldur's Gate or Assassin's Creed or something, that to them is like, that's what I want to do this weekend. And so they'll do 6 months of backbreaking work to make that weekend a reality. And for people like us, you know, we basically, we get an email, and then 6 months later we take a flight, show up, have a few wonderful days, and then it's over. And what an unbelievable privilege to be subject of somebody's a passion like that. For those that have no idea what we're talking about, in Ubeda, it was 2012, I believe, almost 10 years ago, where for the last however many years in Spain, in this very small town of Ubeda, there was a film music festival that would celebrate, you know, they had a rotating roster of composers, and then at some point they decided to start including video game music in there. And I don't actually know when they started doing that, if it was when we were there, or if it was before.
My friend. No, that was a historic moment. We actually met on a very historic moment in not only, you know, but in their history. That was the very first game music concert ever, and that's why it was so very, very special. And I never felt so welcomed. Honestly,
I didn't realize it was their first time doing game music. I probably just in my onset dementia, I learned that and then have subsequently forgot it, because I can't imagine they didn't tell me at the time. But that's amazing. That makes it all the more incredible. I remember it was a concert specifically celebrating video games and animation, because they also performed one of my favorite scores, which is Shirley Walker's Batman Mask of the Phantasm.
Right.
Which was a very cool thing to share the stage with. So we were in Spain, in this little town, which is like a trade outpost, where it has this wonderful kind of European meets Muslim and Moorish architectural fusion, and it feels like a little medieval castle town. And they do very the concert.
Very suitable for your premiere of Journey, right?
Yeah, it was a truly astounding event, because what happened was that I was sharing a studio with a composer who's mostly known for film and television, named John Debney, and the Spanish hermanos who planned this event were coming to his building to just say hi. He had been there in previous years, and they were visiting LA and making the rounds of all their composer friends that they had made as time had gone by. And so they were visiting John, and a mutual friend said, you know, John, there's a composer downstairs from John's studio. You should meet him and say hi. So these guys show up at my door. I get an email saying they're coming. We meet, and we just immediately hit it off. And I said, can I share with you some music on a thing that I've been working on for the last 3 years? It means a lot to me. And no one has heard this yet, because the game was not coming out for like another month. And I played them Journey there in my studio. The score was all finished, and we were just waiting for it to finish certification and come out. And they, right there on the spot, said, we'd like to perform this in Ubeda this summer. And it blew my mind, because they took a chance. You know, Journey was not a big title. And the fact that it exploded the way it did, no one could have predicted that, and there was no guarantee of that. And they could have had a situation of promising to perform music from a game that was a total flop by a composer no one ever heard of, and it could have been.
But that's the beauty, my friend. This is exactly the beauty of these people and these guys, because you know, I've been talking and telling all my friends about these guys. I mean, my friends from Poland, our friends from Poland, and our friends from Spain, Ubeda. These guys, the only thing that matters, and which is a really, really impressive and very touching personally for me, is the music only.
Yeah.
I mean, and it proves it, because, as you said, the world premiere of Journey was precisely 2012, the year and the place we met for the very first time, and nobody knew that it's going to be the music of the decade at that time. We all loved it. We all celebrated it and enjoyed it. But this very moment, they didn't know, but they instantly fell in love with your music and instantly decided to perform it live. And that's why I love these guys so much, because it's a very, very rare thing nowadays to judge a composer only by his music, not by his name, or the studio he's coming, or the country he's coming from, or if he's speaking in an English like a barbarian like myself at the moment, or if he's a native English speaker. You know what I'm talking about, right? You know that I'm an honest person.
You're an utter savage.
Yeah, I'm a savage and rough at the edges, but at least you cannot say that I'm dishonest or anything. But we were talking about our friends and the way they celebrate the video game music with all their hearts, which is truly astonishing and amazing.
Well, and it's something that could be said of you as well, which is why I think you and I clicked so instantly during our adventure that week in Ubeda, because we had not met, and it was one of those where I was familiar with your music, but I didn't really know it. I didn't remember your name, but I had played those games and I had looked up the music at one point or another. But it was kind of like this wonderful chance to get to know the man and then revisit the music. And I love that experience where you then, now that I've got this bias, because it's like I'm listening to music by someone I know I like and whose friendship I immediately cherish, you project that onto it. And the result is that I hear things differently. I hear the music through a very different lens, for better or worse. It's clearly a biased listening, but in some ways it also feels like, well, I feel like I get to hear it how you intend it. And I immediately was like, wow, this is a serious composer. I as much as I knew it from the moment I got back to LA, like just because on display at the concert was plenty testimony, but I really got to know your writing in the years since then. And it just consistently has blown me away as somebody who I thought, here's a person who I know works very hard. That much is clear. But my God, you really hear it in the writing now that I kind of know what I'm listening for.
My friend, this is very touching for me. And let me share something that I was talking with Claudio and Joshua right before we joined the conversation. We were talking about how good idea is that you exactly is hosting and leading these podcasts, because usually I will tell you a secret. It's not going to be a secret anymore, but I don't feel comfortable giving interviews at all, and I rarely give an interview, especially if it's a spoken one. Usually what I do, I prefer to to get some topics or questions or anything in advance so that I can take my time, sit down, and don't embarrass myself too much with my poor English skills. But honestly speaking, now talking to you, I feel bloody comfortable and I feel like totally at home with you. No, you can feel it. I mean, you cannot fake something like this, right? And I'm telling you this because it's a brilliant idea. First of all, I'd like to say once again, congratulations for this lovely initiative, doing this. I watched all the podcast so far, and it's a lovely idea, guys. And,
well, I can say, yeah, I can claim no credit for it.
You should.
Well, no, all credit to our friends at DICE, Claudio and Joshua, for inviting me. The podcast started before me with Ted Price from Insomniac, and I loved the format, and I had listened to it here and there. Because I had friends who had been guests, and I was like, oh, and I didn't really know it, but either way, you're very kind. I consider it a real privilege to be able to have these unguided chats, and especially in this case, because as someone who to steer it back on you, as much as I appreciate your kind words, and I'm grateful that you feel this comfort, but I love. Something I retained from every conversation we've had and was echoed even on doing this panel remotely over Zoom recently together in Poland, is that you put a lot of thought into your work and a lot of process. And yet, if I may say, and correct me if I'm mischaracterizing you, you are also a very intuitive musician. you rely on what feels right, and you're not afraid to go with something because it has the right feeling. Even though I think you bring a powerful intellect to your writing, and the balance of those two things is not common. Sometimes people are pure instinct, right? They just write music based on how it feels, and it doesn't matter to them anything beyond the emotion it evokes right there in that moment, and it's very spontaneous. And then for others, it's a rigorously intellectual process that is almost detached from how it makes them feel.
You're damn right, my friend. You're damn right, and you know why? Uh, because the intuition is the most important thing. It's so important that at some point in my career, I realized that if I don't have more authority in my music production, I won't be able to express myself freely and openly and the way I do. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing for me, which I keep telling to my students and to my guys, is that the most important thing is to enjoy the process of creation. If you don't enjoy the process of creation, we cannot expect that anyone else there will be enjoying our music when it's released, right? I believe that you'd agree with me. And going back to your question, to enjoy the process, we need to follow our intuition in the first place. Because if we only follow temp tracks, guidelines, direction, or anything else, and not just look deep down inside and bring out the music that is born and follow our intuition, it's not going to work at the end of the day, because we cannot fake, we cannot fool the people. I believe that you'd agree with me. People always understand when a music was composed with intuition, with passion, and when the composers had fun during the process of creation. And that's why we share something very special. Remember what I told you one day, that when I see that you scored a game, this is an instant buy for me. You know why? Not because I love your music and you as a composer so much, but because I know that you always stay faithful to yourself about being free to experiment, to express yourself, and never to put any constraints and limit on yourself. At least that's the way I feel, and I can give a lot of examples. And
well, that's very kind. I want to jump onto something specific that you said that's interesting, because it sounds to me that the kind of cliche of the tortured artist is very antithetical to how you feel. Like when we think of the classic mythology of Beethoven, where the creative process is, at least in the kind of perception of him, I don't know how historically accurate this, it's not really provable how true this is, but certainly the perception is that he did not derive joy from the creative experience. That was actually deeply painful to him. And of course you can feel that pain in a lot of the writing, but even in the joyous music that he wrote, it did not come easily. And it sounds like you're saying you come at this from essentially the opposite direction. If it's torture, something's wrong.
Yeah. Actually, I'm very, this is very interesting what you're saying, and I never thought about it. But now that you mention it, makes me wonder and makes me realize that you're totally right. It's completely the other way around with me. And I even remember a moment when my boss, I was telling him a very happy event from my life about something. I don't remember what it was, but I was very happy. And he said, and what? Now you're going to start composing sheet music because you're a very happy person? And we were laughing, but this is basically what you're saying. And now I realize that it really doesn't work this way for me. I can write and compose the most dramatic and sad music when I'm happy and when I enjoy the process of creation. And when I feel totally down and miserable, honestly, I simply isolate myself, and it's really hard for me to compose and produce music. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. No, sometimes, of course, if you feel an overflow of emotions, love, hate, or pain, or anything else, of course, this could be a driving force to compose a piece of music. But when I think about it, when I draw the line at the end of the day, I'm most productive, and I composed the highest quality music when I feel satisfied, happy, and when I'm in, I have the internal harmony in myself.
So
I don't
how do
know.
you deal? So then what happens if you're working on a project that, as just sometimes it happens, the whole issue of crunch and scheduling is a very contentious topic in the game industry these days. But I do think, in my personal opinion, sometimes it is just unavoidable because creative work is so hard to schedule predictably.
You're absolutely right.
So how do you cross that bridge? Because there's no doubt that it's very stressful and very taxing, but
It
we
is.
still have a job to do. So how
Right.
you're definitely a consummate professional. So how do you force yourself to create? You must surely have some kind of process or like ritual to get yourself in gear if you're stressed and feeling down and horrible, but the deadline is looming because.
Yeah. Actually, this is a really brilliant question, and I'm gonna try to connect it to the previous topic about is it true that only tortured artists could produce something very special and high quality music. The thing is, my friend, that 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it was a completely different story in my career. Back then, the stress was huge. Okay, to put it in a different way, in the early days of my career, the stress was way bigger, and it was exactly the way you explaining. I was supposed to work under very heavy constraints, the time limited milestones, and a lot of people I had to report to. And you know what? Now when I look back, I realize that even though the music was well accepted and received, it was completely different in comparison to the one that I compose and produce it now. And know what
Interesting.
what is the difference? When I'm under stress, when I don't have all the freedom in the world, when I have to follow, somebody else's direction. When I say somebody else's, I mean completely different than the one that I would follow personally, provided I have freedom to do so. I go in a very special mode, and it's very pragmatic.
Right.
Pragmatic means, I try to compose a music that I'm more or less certain that it's gonna work, and the music that is gonna
Like it's safe. You're not embracing any risk, right? Sure.
Exactly. You cannot embrace any risk. I play safe. I produce safe. Of course, I try to be as original as possible in terms of thematic material. But at the end of the day, when you draw the line, it's more of the same. Nothing new under the sun. And this is the main reason and the main moment I realized that I need to do something in my career. I need to make a huge change. And you know what I did? I decided that from this point on, I will try to be not only the composer but also the music director. It was very hard. It was very hard because basically I wanted to be my own boss. So at the beginning, the people were like, "What exactly are you saying here? Do you want to be, the guy that approves the music or gives the direction? We don't really get it." And I said, "Guys, if you truly believe me that I'm the right person for your project, you should give me all the freedom. You should let me express myself freely." And come up with something new, put something new, brave and inventive on the table. If you and I promise you that it's gonna be driven and provoked by your child, your creation.
Right. Yeah. The game will be the guiding light.
The game is gonna be, the driving force, the story, the narrative design, the gameplay, the visuals, everything. But you need to trust me if you want me to be your guy. Which means that automatically, this means that I need to be not only the composer, but I also need to be the music director and the producer. Oh, basically, it was an impossible request, as you can imagine, because this is rarely the case.
Were you up to that point in your life, had you only worked as a composer freelance?
Yeah.
And so basically so then if I understand correctly, you basically are saying at that moment you wanted to look for a staff position as a music director, because well, is that a fair assessment then? Like, I want to be employed.
It is a very fair assessment, and basically, I realized that the only way to keep developing myself, not only as a composer but also to be the music director and the producer of the production, that's the only way to go, because it's really rare and hard. Basically, correct me if I'm mistaken, but there is no such a position. You cannot be a freelance composer at the same time and the music director in a game production.
I mean, yeah, I have a few. There's a few friends. Yeah, exactly.
It's really the case.
Exactly. Yeah. Very. Darren Korb is the audio director at Supergiant, and when I released,
but this is exactly what I am actually, because he basically Darren and I share the same boat.
Yeah.
More or less.
Oh, for sure. No, it's the same. And I've asked them this question before. You know, could you ever take on, if someone approached you to score a game other than Supergiant, could you do it? And he said, you know, I'd basically need special permission from Supergiant. They would probably give it to me, but the scope would have to be pretty small because it's a full-time job. You know, I already have so many hours committed. It's not like I'm sitting on my ass most of the time. And so,
exactly,
you know,
because he's also the audio director. I mean, if you are only a composer, in-house composer, that would be a completely different story. But when you are the composer, the music, and the audio director, it's basically an even beyond full-time job.
Exactly.
I actually doubted that he could score even a small indie game with all those responsibility on his shoulders.
It would not be easy.
No, definitely not be easy, and definitely it would not be worth it, if you ask me. But going back to your question, yeah, I can work, and you know, when I work under stress and under very limited and tough circumstances, my style of composing and producing music is completely different. Then the only or the originality comes mainly from the thematic material and not so much from the style and from the new and brave elements which I would put on the table. But when I have
total sense.
Yeah, of course, and that's why I decided that I would rather, you know, turn the wheel and do something completely different, start developing myself in a slightly different direction. And if you look back in the past 5, 6, 10 years, all the games that I scored, basically I'm not only the composer but also the music director, because I realized that that's the only way I can have all the freedom in the world to express myself freely. And if the guys are happy with my work, they will keep working with me. If they're not happy, fair enough. Obviously, that was not the right fit, and I just need to keep looking for my people. But I was so very happy. Yeah, and I was seriously lucky, because you know I cannot lie. I must admit that I'm the luckiest composer in the world at the moment, because especially the past 5-6 years in my career, finding my professional home at Larian Studios was a dream come true.
Well, that's a perfect segue. I was going to say, you know, because ironically, we've talked for a half an hour and we haven't even discussed any of your specific projects. But I really want to get into them. And obviously, so you joined Larian, you said 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, I believe so. It was 2016, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, 2016.
So let's come to that in a moment. I'd love to go back earlier, because your experience in this, like you worked on Crysis 2 and Crysis 3, which are obviously pretty enormous titles, and but you were not in a music director position there, right?
I was.
Oh, you were? Okay. Well, good. I'm glad I asked, because I was going to say I don't consider those to be safe. And that's why I was going to try and challenge, but I'm glad I had that missing information then. Okay, because the story that you told me once, that I hope you don't mind me sharing here, was when you came to LA for your meeting with Hans Zimmer regarding Crysis 2. Papa Hans, I'll never forget you called him, which to this day I think of that and I'll just burst out laughing randomly. And I love it. And you told me that you spoke for like hours, and you couldn't tell the read on the situation until finally you said something like, is this of interest? And correct me if I'm wrong, that his response was something to the effect of, do you think I would have let you just talk for this much time if I wasn't interested?
That was a historic moment in my life, actually, because he was basically we were not only talking, but I was playing my music to him. The long story short, I was supposed to present the music that was composed. The main body of the work was done at that time when I visited LA, and I was supposed to meet Uncle Hans or Papa Hans, the way I love
Uncle Hans. Actually, I think it is. Yeah, Uncle. I think I messed it up.
And, I was over the moon of joy because at that time, it was a dream come true to meet such a legend like himself. And I was supposed to present the main body of the work because the score was done. I'm talking about the in-game music. Right. And I was lucky that our producers had the budget and the contacts to hire Hans to give the frames and to compose the main themes of the. But this time around, it was done the other way around. Instead of at the beginning, the main themes were composed at the end to give the quality and these Hollywood frames he's basically known for. And absolutely amazing experience because you can imagine a small boy like myself coming from a post-communist country, all of a sudden, sitting in the red cabinet of the legend Hans Zimmer and playing his bloody music to this legend. I mean, I couldn't believe it was happening. And then at some point, I was shy enough, but brave enough rather to say, do you think it's okay? Or something like this. And this is exactly when he said, do you think I would be wasting my time if it wasn't?
Yeah. And this was hours, right? I mean, I think you said it was like 2 hours or something.
Hours, yeah, because it was a huge score. It was 5 hours of score. And of course, I selected the best pieces of music that I considered the best at that time. But still, playing 2 hours of music of your own to the legend Hans Zimmer, it was a surreal moment in my life. And I can tell you another amusing story about Hans, by the way. At the end of our meeting, everybody went outside for a smoke, and I was alone with Hans. So I had like 15 to 20 minutes to talk, just two of us. And then I said, Hans, can I tell you a short story? And he answered, but of course, go ahead. And I said, many years ago, when I scored my very first game, I gave an interview. And the very last question of the interview was, if you have a chance to meet one person in the world, who would that be? And what would the question be? And I made a dramatic pause, looked Hans in the eye and asked him, and do you know what my answer was? And he goes, please do tell me. And I answered, I said, the person that I want to meet is Hans Zimmer, and the question I want to ask him is, may I shake your hand, Mr. Zimmer? And telling him this, I gave my hand to him. And
I imagine he rejected it resolutely, and you were heartbroken.
He gave me a big smile. He shook my hand, and honestly, this is one of the real highlights in my life because we all grew up with his scores, right? And
yeah, absolutely. Well, and that was one of the first times he ever. I think it was the second time specifically he had dipped his toes into the world of games, if I remember correctly. It wasn't. Call of Duty was not long before that. Yeah. But then moving on. So you were music director at Crytek. I don't think I remembered that detail.
Yeah, basically that was the reason I went to LA because I was not only the lead composer but also the music director, and I was supposed to discuss the direction with Hans and to present him the entire score. Basically, that was the reason we went to LA and spent I believe a week or so there. And so
you came into that position because Crysis 1, I think, is Enon, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's another story, by the way. There is a curse or a blessing in my career that, I always score the second part in a series. So I scored I scored Crysis 2, I scored Two Worlds 2, I scored Divinity Original Sin 2. I mean, I was like, come on, give me a break. And then, it
Well,
happened.
you've
I mean,
you've upgraded with Baldur's Gate 3.
yeah. I went +1, but yeah, it's a nice change. But still, it's very challenging because when you're supposed to fill somebody else's shoes, especially when we're talking about people like Enon, it's definitely a challenging task. And previously, the legendary composer of Divinity series, Kirill Pokrovsky, I always need to fill somebody else's shoes, which is always huge challenge and huge stress, honestly speaking.
And it's funny because that's not something that you can deliberately, like, no one could intentionally make their career that
No.
way. It's just
I
been
would,
as
I would, I would do
fascinating.
totally the opposite. Actually, if you ask me now, I would do totally the opposite because the challenge, the stress, and the expectations are so huge
Yeah,
to
for
happen.
sure. Yeah.
It scared the shit out of me. I mean, but at the end of the day, I believe that you and I are share the same passion, and if it's not challenging, and it's not something that we can come up with new and brave ideas, we wouldn't be able to express ourselves the way we do actually. And one of the things, again, I need to mention some of your music. One of the things that I truly enjoy about listening to every new score of yours is that you always put something new and you always surprise me.
That's very kind. Well, I feel the same. I remember specifically with Divinity Original Sin 2. I was on the jury for Dice, and that was the first time playing the game and hearing the score in context was the first time. I had known you did it, but I just hadn't had a chance to check it out. And I remember going and listening, and it's one of those where that's the kind of game that very much looks like a video game. Meaning, you have games like, Crysis actually is a good example where as games have raised their production value and become more, quote, cinematic, and you have recent games this year like The Last of Us Part 2 or The Ghost of Tsushima, where there's this kind of arms race to be more cinematic, more realistic, all those things. Yeah. And so then when you play a
game, actually, you're right, agree.
Yeah, and so it's why I think for the fortunately every year there's fewer and fewer people in the world who just dismiss games because they see it all as Pac-Man, and so it's a shame because there's such artistry and like this year, for example, Hades of Supergiant Games is a good example of it looks so much. It's beautiful, but it obviously looks very much like a classic video game. And to dismiss it would be to dismiss something of tremendous artistic value. In fact, it kills me that we chatted on here with Darren before that game came out because I would have loved to really get into some nitty gritty now that I've played it an ungodly number of hours. But the Divinity 2, Original Sin 2, has the same trapping where you look at a glance and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's a video game. I'm familiar with video games. It's so easy to dismiss it. And as soon as I fired it up, what I loved was that your music was like, this is going to be an emotional experience with complete and total conviction. There was zero sense that this should be anything other than a serious work of art, even if the mechanics it's leaning on and the isometric sort of design. These are familiar concepts within the world of video games, but this is a serious creation. And to me, the music was the first thing that made me pause and go, "This is a real game. This is a proper experience because you committed to it so fully and with such class." And plus, I gotta say, man, not a lot of composers can also just write a tune, like just fully like in the simplest sense, a melody that's memorable. And I was so charmed that first thing out of the gate was this theme that was like a real theme that reminded me of the themes I grew up listening to it's uncommon. It's really because it's hard, first off, but also
I need to tell you now. I need to stop you and to tell you now, my friend. You know what? I will never forget your reaction when you dropped me a message over Facebook to let me know what you think about the score. You know, I forget most of the things, but you know what? That is one of those moments that I remembered. You dropped me a message, and it was something like, "Hey, dude, this is really cool. Sounds like a really high quality musical. I love it." And I was like, damn, this is really good. Feels really good that
Well, it's just the truth.
somebody like Costing can tell you such a heartwarming thing. And what I'm trying to say is that coming from you, it means a lot, man. It means truly a lot,
Well,
because the
it's
world of
real
video
genuine
games.
admiration.
You know what I wanted to touch base about, this why this is a really brilliant idea that music composer is hosting and leading the conversations in the podcast, because it feels completely different, and it gives a completely different name to the relationship between the composers. Because I don't know, how do you feel about it? It's sort of taboo topic, but sometimes if I step out of of my circle of trust, where you are one of my main persons, I can feel the cold-blooded and hostile behavior. I don't know if I don't want to go too deep into such a sensitive topic, but I hope you understand what I'm saying. And what makes me really happy is that in the past couple of years, there is a development in a completely different direction, where all the composers feel so much like band of brothers, like rather than deadly competitors who would rather cut their throats rather than sharing ideas, thoughts, and yeah. But you know what I mean. And I dream for the moment, my friend, when this circle of trust of ours, it's not going to be a circle but a sphere of trust.
That's the goal. I mean, to me, my simple philosophy is,
Because at the end of the day, what is the most important thing? We cannot, we can only be inspired and provoked by one another, and we can support one another, and we can, have this healthy competition, and at the same time, healthy feedback and inspiration and shared passion for music. And I think that that's the only way to go to the next level, and to get even wider and more passionate audience at the end of the day. And that's why when I talk with people like you, this makes me immensely happy.
Yeah, I was essentially going to say the exact same thing. For me, the art form is what I mean, I love. There's two things I love equally. It's humans. I love inspiring people. I love when people inspire me. I mean, if I can be inspiring too, that's also wonderful. If it happens, but what I mean is that I try to hold people close to me that drive me and make me better and inspire me. But I really, really love the art form for its own sake, and the idea of supporting colleagues and propping each other's work up. What I like, that solves both of those things in one move, because it means that the art form is made better. Like if I had any hand in supporting the career development of somebody, and then they went off and did something that really elevated the art, like they went and wrote just the score of the year, and if I played some small role in that, that's something I would have as much pride in that than anything I could ever write of my own, because I would think I love that this person, they went and made the business better. They made games better. There will be more inspired and stimulated gamers out there, and people enjoying this work for what it is, hopefully getting meaning from it, growing from it, being provoked, having thoughts provoked from it. And if I played some small role in that happening, even though if I didn't have any real direct role in its creation, I take a lot of pride in that, because I want the art form to flourish, because in the end, the better it is, it's just a better world. So I feel the same, and I do think, as someone who walks a little bit in the film world, I do love our game music community so very much, because it's as you just said, there is a kind of a sphere of trust, and broadly speaking, there's a lot of the composers maintain touch with each other, support each other. I very often, when I have a new release come out and I'll write something on Twitter, if I peruse the retweets, it'll be people like you, or it'll be people like Joe and Alexis, the flight in the UK, or Jessica Curry, or Joris de Man. There's a lot of Darren, Jason Graves. Like, I have a lot of friends who are very supportive of what I do, and I back at them, and I always take note of that when I see them doing this, and it really, I think it's a beautiful culture for us to try to keep.
Yeah, it's very beautiful, and correct me if I'm mistaken, but what makes me very proud is that our game community, circle or sphere of trust, is something completely different thing than the film scoring community.
Night and day.
I might be wrong.
No, you're not. You're not at all.
Happy that the game people, we are different sort of people. I don't want the game to sound racist or anything, or to put myself aside, but I'm an honest person, as you, and makes me very happy that the video games are not only different media, but specifically the video game composers are willing to stick together, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I've spent a lot of time with people that pretty much exclusively work in film and television, and there are composer friendships, like famously Hans Zimmer or James Newton Howard, that kind of thing. But obviously they're the exception, and that's what makes them memorable. And my only hypothesis about that is that the film industry it's basically 100 years older than the game industry, or 70 years older. And so it's grown, it's kind of gotten comfortable. It's like the equivalent of an old man who says, look, I do things the way I want to do things, don't try and change me. And it's like the racist grandpa, where you're like, look, he just comes from a time where people didn't correct him when he said racist shit. And now he's just so used to saying it that the battle that would ensue trying to make him stop is just not worth it. So you just have to make peace with the fact that he's a racist, but he's probably not also an asshole, to the extent that those two can coexist. It kind of feels like that in a way. You've got a culture where people are like, look, this is just, composers don't really band together, with rare exception, because that's how it's been for 60 years, and it wasn't always like that in the early days. It wasn't like that. But so my goal is that as our industry grows older, and we grow older with it, that we can try to hang on to that as long as possible, if in fact age is the main difference between the two.
Absolutely agree, man. And speaking about how old is the film scoring industry in comparison to the video game music, do you think that we are coming to an era where the code for orchestral music is coming to an end, and we are going to witness different directions in scoring? Because I'm having the impression that something like this is happening lately. I might be wrong, but people do enjoy a lot more different styles. Maybe this is just in the video game industry, or maybe it's a global thing. I don't really know, but I truly hope that what I'm observing is true on a global level. Because not that I love scoring, and I love using orchestral music, but I believe that we should keep exploring. And even though it's such a beautiful tradition when it comes to using the orchestra, we should continue and explore new layers, new directions, new dimensions, if you like. And one of the things that makes me so very happy about video game music is that it gives so much more freedom to us, the fellow video game music composers, to explore. And
I have a thought there. So here's I don't have any kind of empirical data to back this up, but this is kind of what my gut tells me is the answer to that. The let's say that like we're looking at a pie graph or a pie chart of the number of and it's like percentages of scores that are orchestral. And if we go back 20 years, maybe it's 90%, let's say, like around 2000, especially once recording orchestra became possible, and that became everybody's fantasy, all over again, because after we got out of the 16-bit era, and CD-ROM said, hey, you could actually have a recording session, and that became a thing. Then suddenly it was just like you weren't a real video game unless you had a big orchestra, and so if 20 years ago, let's say 90% of scores were orchestral, and those that weren't were very atypical. Flash forward to today, maybe it's 50%. But the thing that would be interesting is if you were to look at absolute numbers, let's say that there were 100 scores released 20 years ago, and therefore 90 of those scores, because of the 90%, 90 were orchestral. Today, if it's 50%, it's still probably 90 scores, but the total number of games being made has gone up and therefore forced the percentage down. No. Because I still think there's a ton of orchestral work being done, but we've also just seen more people making more games with wider, the resurgence of chiptunes, all the experimentation with intimate solo scores, or things like what Darren does, where it's like it's practically a one-man band, and everything in between, very super experimental sort of sound design driven work. It's like none of those I think have necessarily taken away from orchestral scores. It just means there's more people, there's new people adding to the equation.
Right. I haven't thought about it, but you're totally right. The number of video games now is completely different, and
it's definitely not twice. It's like 10,000 more games per year than last year. Never mind 20 years ago.
It's madness. Can you imagine? I can't even follow the names of the video games, but it's truly amazing how fast our industry is growing. And how fast it managed to catch up with the film industry, by the way, because now it's totally, it's an art on its own right already, and it's official.
Yeah.
So thinking about the 100-year-old film industry and the late 20 years video game industry, we are heroes.
Yeah, it's so well. So going back then to because your use of the orchestra in Divinity Original Sin 2 was it was beautifully executed, and there was nothing about it that felt like you were sort of using the orchestra against your will, I guess. And so it's interesting to hear you say what you just said, because that's a score that it's written with integrity. How do I reconcile these two statements then? Because it's not like it's only orchestra. Like you have all these beautiful instruments that usually you playing them, isn't it? I know you play a handful of.
Yeah. I have a collection of instruments, and that's one of my favorite things. Every time I start a brand new project, what I do, I travel to a new places, and I collect and I buy brand new ethnic instruments, because I play stringed instruments, and that's a huge pleasure for myself, and gives me inspiration, because that every single instrument brings spirit, brings his soul, and pushes you toward a very specific direction. And it was the same with Divinity. The moment I realized that I have all the freedom in the world, it was decided. I'm going to use the foundation of the orchestra, but I'm going to make a hybrid score, and I'm going to go wild with any bloody single instrument that comes to my mind. And I used maybe more than 25 different instruments for this score. And not all of them were performed by me.
Okay, that was good. Yeah, that was my question. Just two?
Just a few. I was lucky enough to have a lot of passionate musicians by my side, so a lot of specifically woodwind instruments, and some of the stringed instruments were performed by other fellow musicians. But every time I have the opportunity, I play myself, because the thing is that one of my favorite instruments to compose is basically a guitar.
Mm,
It's like 70 to 30%. So most of the people, I believe, including you are composing with piano. Piano is your main composing instrument.
correct.
I would assume. But for me, it's the other way around. I mean, I use piano, but it's not my main instrument to compose music, believe it or not. And even if some of my most and best accepted pieces were initially composed, and not composed, but let's say sketched and mocked up, starting with a guitar, and
So how do
then
you make that work then? Because the guitar, part of what gives the piano, just for especially for anybody listening who's not a composer, what part of what makes the piano a very effective tool is that it's it's probably one of the most neutral instruments. You can use a piano to write for other instruments.
you're right, my friend, and this
Uh,
is the reason why most of the composers use it as their main instrument to compose
exactly.
music. Yeah.
Yeah, guitar really pushes you towards sounding like a guitar.
I'm
And
going to tell you a secret now, and it's not going to be a secret anymore. Second time today. Yeah. So, because I feel most comfortable with stringed instruments, not only guitar, but the guitar family in general, I have a lot of different instruments from all over the world in my collection. So, what I usually do, I tune, the stringed instruments I'm going to use for a specific composition in a very custom way. So, I tune my guitar, let's say, in a specific way, which suits the very composition, the very idea that I have in my mind. So it's not tuned necessarily in the orthodox and the traditional way.
right, yeah,
Some,
that makes a lot of sense. I would
uh,
you'd have
but,
to.
uh, but I take the time to tune it in a way that it supports what I'm trying to do at the moment. This is the first part of the secret. And the second one is that I always sing when I compose music. Not always, but let's say a lot of the time and that's why, my friend, you noticed, the tendency to put a lot of thematic material in my scores. That's the
Mhm.
reason why. Because the moment, let's say that I start composing with a guitar tune in a very specific way, guitar is, 50% of the way I express myself and the way I sketch up my composition. The other 50% is my voice, and then this is the way I express myself in the best possible way, and I feel most comfortable. Then when I listen to the recordings, I have a really good starting point, and then I start, and then what I do, I I jump on my computer gear, and I start arranging, experimenting, developing, and pushing the composition in that or the other direction. But the very beginning, the very foundation, and the very reason because you notice that my music is so thematic is
Mhm.
because I'm using guitar and my voice as
So
to
then just
mock up.
yeah, I mean, it makes total sense. And I often encourage young composers to try and sing their material because I think what I think, just given that human beings are monophonic instruments that all human beings can sing to some degree or another, we have the easiest time remembering things that are singable. And
Yes,
so
precisely.
it makes total sense that you would have this tack. But then, just from a purely kind of composer shop talk standpoint, how do you go about the process of arranging something orchestral where the orchestra is just not put together the way any single instrument is? That's what makes the orchestra interesting, is that it does things that you'd need 100 hands on 100 pianos to be able
Exactly.
to truly
Yeah.
simulate. How do you make that leap if you're leaning so heavily on the guitar? Like for things like, just to be very specific, things like counterpoint or you know very kind of dense, uniquely voiced harmonies, those kinds of things. Like, are you then just working at a MIDI station like anybody else, or how do you make that leap if it's so born out of the guitar for you?
The thing is that most of the in most of the cases I start from the theme itself, from the tune. Not always, but most of the times. And when I have a tune that fully satisfies me, that makes me happy, I can go wherever I like. I can pick up any direction, and I can take any harmony that I feel dear to my heart. And I can give you examples. I often find myself in a situation when the basic harmony of the composition I came with at the very beginning goes completely washed away and is completely different at the end, because it basically serves only the purpose to come up with a meaningful and satisfying theme for me.
I see. So it's an
And
iterative.
then when I have the tune, we're not talking about harmonies, because when you're using a guitar to accompany your basic idea, it goes without saying that you cannot come with deep, meaningful, interesting, or new harmonies. That's not impossible, but let's say very, very hard and difficult, and rarely the case having so. But once I have the theme on the table, I'm very happy with it, and exactly the way you describe it, it's easily repeated by anyone there. This gives me usually the confidence that I'm on the right track. Okay, this is the theme. It's, let's say, 2 minutes long with all the variations. Then I sit down and I decide what exactly is the harmony I would like to go for, depending on the narrative design, depending on the situation, depending on this. And what I usually do, to the point that the people are freaking out sometimes, and some people really, I drive some people crazy, that I give different iterations to the same tune, like in 10 different ways. And recently I read a comment over internet. I really love the music of Slavov, but he needs to calm the fuck down with his motifs and tunes, because I've been hearing this tune for the 15th time, and I'm really, really tired of it. And then I took, I couldn't restrain myself and answered, I promise this is going to be the last one. And the next, package of music, I'm not going to use this motif anymore. Relax. So what I'm saying here, going back to your question, is that the very essence of my approach is to come up with a theme I'm happy with. From this point on, I can arrange this theme in a very different directions.
Yeah,
I can
makes total sense.
I can, make it. I can scale it down. I can scale it down. I can make it romantic. I can make it epic. And if I go back, referring to the Divinity Original Sin 2, the main theme has maybe 25 different iterations there, depending on the different situations, key story moments in your campaign, battles, and so on. So this is the way how I feel comfortable.
Now, to that end, I was going to ask you something different, but you just gave me a thought. How much do you pre-plan? Like you just said, there's a couple of dozen variations that you're going to end up needing on this theme. How much of that do you know in advance? And that's information that you have at the beginning of the writing process. In other words, you write a theme under the knowledge that it's going to need a zillion variations, versus this is a tune that I want to be very strong, but it really is only going to appear in this particular piece. And then I will set it aside. And so its constraints or its demands are very different. Another way to just phrase this simpler is how much pre-planning of a total score are you in the position of doing most of the time? Do you know what?
Very, very, very nice question, my friend. So the thing is that it really depends on the situation. So usually when I would like to have a theme which would be suitable to be developed and arranged in a lot of totally different directions, what I try to do is to make to compose a very scalable theme, is the way I prefer to name it. So even if I come with something very beautiful and very nice that I truly love, if I don't consider it scalable, I don't stop. You know what I mean? Because in some cases, like in the case of Divinity Original Sin 2, so I had to come up with an idea which I wanted to govern all the different directions I was supposed to cover one way or the other. There was an epic, dark version. There was, very melancholic, romantic, and at the end of the day, there was, a church. I was supposed to implement the very same thematic material. So it had to be very scalable in any given direction.
Well, so with
And
that, what you just hinted on was kind of what I'm trying to unearth here is how did you even know all those needs? Like, is this one of those where you're coming in on a project like that, for example, where the developer has already spec'd out the game far enough? Because if you're staff, you're there from day one when the game is not even a concept drawing, right? It's just a green light or maybe not even a green light, but it's just a proposal for a title.
That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it, my friend. Because being, the director and staying close with all the stuff, and I have an access to the narrative design from day one, from day zero.
So do you ever grapple with
whatever? Yeah. I totally. Every single day, I update myself with the new story, with the new narrative design, with the new gameplay design, with the new level design, and this is an ongoing process. And
yeah.
at the very beginning, what I have at my disposal is basically the initial script, the initial idea with the initial story. Of course, this story is being developed, changed a lot, and updated throughout the entire game development process. But at the end of the day, the very core, the very essence of the idea, what is going to be all about, is there. So I have the information. And going back to your previous question, when I have this information, then I know that I need at least two themes which should be completely scalable in any given direction, up and down. And I was even having this conversation with one of my guys. I was arguing that basically, if you have a scalable theme, you cannot make any kind of arrangement. You can make it scary, you can make it happy, you can make it romantic, you can make it whatever you like, as long as this is a really good and scalable thematic material. By scalable, I mean something that when it's stripped down to its pure form and nature, it's very clean, very hooky, and I don't know how to put it in English.
I can easily offer at least my take on it, which is that it's something that can undergo a lot of variation while still being clear what it is.
Exactly, my friend. This is exactly what I was trying to say. Can you please give me some English lessons?
Well, for a savage, you do quite well. But so then, have you ever had a situation, because that's all sounds very kind of, nice and according to plan, that you're just basically working alongside them. But I certainly, in my experience, there have been plenty of games where some big creative revelation from the team, from a design standpoint, from a narrative standpoint, or whatever, midway through makes me realize that all the music suddenly has to change because the game is now X instead of Y, and the score is still Y, so I got to either throw it out or dramatically rewrite it, even though I'm still doing everything that you just said of looking daily at the newest work on narrative design and the script and a lot. Sometimes they just have those moments of epiphany, and you just have to throw it all away. So has that happened for you, and how did you deal with it?
This is very stressful, and of course, it did happen to me in the more often in the past, as you can guess. Before I started to develop myself as a music director, because when I stay close in contact with the guys, they can rarely surprise me. And sort of now, let's say in the during the past 5-6 years, I have the privilege and the chance to stay so close to the people that create a video game that I can sort of predict where we are heading. Well, we will be heading tomorrow, and so this is not a thing today for me. But yes, I've been there before, and first of all, it's very stressful, and I'm a weakling, I must admit, when it comes to coping with stressful environment all the time. But what I was doing back then, I was trying first to identify who my boss is, and you know what I mean, because sometimes even if there is a certain a change in course or you need to tackle with when there are more than one cooks in the kitchen.
Oh yeah.
The most important thing is to realize who's exactly is the driving the directive force there, because it's not always obvious, is what I'm saying. And then,
I mean, the essence of what you just said is such a massive point, and for anybody who's kind of young and hasn't really had a high pressure environment yet, that's to me, that's the defining quality of what makes a situation high stress or high pressure. Because usually creative work, we can do the creative work, but when the powers that be at the table or the cooks in the kitchen disagree on what that ought to be, and you don't know who's really in charge, boy, God, that's an insanely challenging one to navigate.
Exactly. So going back to your question, the very first thing I was doing back then, when I was, frequently finding myself in a situation like this, I was doing my best to find who the boss was. So when this happened, I talked to the real boss, and there were two options. Option number one, if there was a thematic material which was appealing to the boss, I was supposed to follow his or her direction. Then, of course, I would rather take the good thematic material, which is already approved and was going to work for this new direction, and just provide a new arrangement within the context of the new direction. And if it doesn't, of course, there's nothing else but sit down and come up with a brand new piece of music, which is, of course, even more stressful because the time is running out, and you need to sustain the quality and at the same time to follow the brand new direction. But the clean answer is that I try to extract the thematic material which already appeals to the person in charge.
Right, sure. Have you ever had a situation where you made the wrong estimate of who is in charge?
Of course. Of course. A lot of times, many times, and the pain is real.
Yeah, I've had that as well, especially on movies where the director and the producers are disagreeing, and the director is like the creative leader, but the producers most often, they're really the ones in charge, and it's especially challenging in a situation where the director is actually how the project came to be.
Which is very strange, you know why? Because usually the way I see it and the way I would, the way I see it is the director and the producers should be, on the same page.
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you?
And because more or less, of course, creative differences and producer difference, this is something normal. But what was driving me really crazy is when I was finding myself in a situation when I was dealing with a producer and a director which were on a completely different pages, and I was like, what the hell is going on here? How am I supposed to cover all the bloody different nuances? It sounds like a madness. I mean, is it even possible? And then that was the moment I realized that I need to do something different. I need to change my approach. I need to change my strategy because I was going to run crazy. The biggest mistake the young composers do is that they try to appeal to everyone at the same time.
Oh, too true.
And even though it sounds like a very tempting approach, because I want to make everyone happy because I'm really good and I'm I can make it mainstream, I can make it universal, I can make everyone in the universe happy. No, you cannot. There will always be a single person, and it's subjective, and who is not going to be happy with your genius and brilliant piece of music otherwise. And that's why I would rather growing colder and being more experienced resulted in changing my strategy and first trying to identify who is really the guy I need to following, rather than trying to appeal to everyone at the same time.
I think that's also just a bigger philosophical way to be, in terms of just the audience. Never mind your boss, but just the idea of writing a piece of music that there will be people who just don't really like it. And like if I want to write something that's very slow and beautiful and touching, there's going to be some like hardcore metal fan that's just not into it. and I
Of
have
course.
to, and that's okay. That's actually what we want. You want to actually make a statement that
Yes,
some people
yes,
will
and
like and
yes,
some will not. And
yes.
I think, yeah, it's hard though, especially when you're starting, and
But you can make it. I love the word statement, my friend. It's a really beautiful word, and it illustrates very well what we are talking about. Because at the end of the day, if we try to appeal to everyone else at the same time, the music will be faceless.
oh,
You know
absolutely.
what I'm saying? And if we want to stay faithful to ourselves and at the same time to follow the direction of the person in charge, we need to find a way to make a statement. Otherwise, we end up with something that is generic and it's expendable, and something that even if it serves the purpose it was composed and produced for, it's going to be forgotten within a month after release. But it's not wrong to find a person in charge on any given level. You know why? Because at the end of the day, I believe that a single person vision should be followed. When we have, several visions at the same time, I don't believe that this could result in something memorable, or at least it's very hard.
Yeah, it's
And that's
certainly
why
very
I
rare.
believe I believe that no matter what the vision is, here is in a single line, no matter what the vision is, as long as we all together as a team stand behind this vision, it's going to be something amazing at the end.
So
But if there are,
let me ask you then, just pivoting to specifics, like recently Baldur's Gate 3, and my congrats, that's just recent unleashing to the world. Um, uh, how how do you make a statement specifically on this game? How have you managed to make a statement uh, given the obvious challenge of you're doing part 3? There's parts 1 and 2 that musically have their own ideas that they are, maybe going to inform what you've done, and you want to, like we said, you can't please everybody. There's going to be big Baldur's Gate fans over the years that are
yeah,
that you have to, you don't want to push them away, but you also recognize that you can't. There's no way, in advance that there will be some that won't like it. How did you approach that in this particular case?
yeah, yeah, that's a lovely question. Well, as you can imagine, the moment I started to work on the franchise, that was the very first question that I had to deal with. And at the beginning, I was very tempted just to follow the well-established direction and the well-established style. That would be the easiest way, just to follow something that already is well-established, well-known. The people feel at home, and I was really close to take this decision. But then one morning when I woke up, I realized that I put myself in my role as a gamer. So I asked myself the question, what exactly means the game music for you? Think about your favorite piece of music. So I was talking to myself, a bit schizo, but that helps sometimes. Yeah, and I answered. So video game music for me, first, if I love it, if I like it, it enhances, of course, my in-game experience. To put it in a very simple way, I mean, it just elevates my game experience to the next level if I like it and if I find it suitable. The second thing, what is the video game music for me? It's my way to relieve my favorite moments from a game that I truly love. And what does that mean? So if I play Journey and I love the music, it's one thing. But a year or 5 years later, when I listen to the soundtrack of Journey, it's my way to relieve my moments, my experience. And it's not just at this very moment, it's not only the music, but the music unlocks and provokes forgotten emotions, which I truly enjoyed 5 years ago. You know what I'm saying? And then I was keep asking myself questions, and then I realized that if I just follow the very same style, basically I won't be provoking anything new. And we are talking about new chapter, new narrative, new origin stories, new characters. Yes, it's the same universe. Yes, we are talking about the third part, and I'm not gonna say anything else because I don't want to make a wrong step here. But what I realized was that the new narrative design and the new chapter and the new characters and new adventures needs to be supported by new music, because when you experience these adventures and when you enjoy your adventures, when you enjoy carving your own way, the moment you finish your favorite game and you decide to give it another listen to the music that was accompanying your adventures, that's the only way to relive truly and in a unique way what you experienced in the game.
Well, so then it sounds to me like,
and then I realized that was the first part of the way I was thinking about it. But at the same time, you're totally right, and I was taking this into consideration. I need to make something to make the people feel at home, because obviously I cannot put heavy metal guitars or whatever I like, or I can go completely wild with psychoacoustic, totally without tonality, And I did an analysis of the of the main elements of the previous installment in the series, when I'm talking about the legendary soundtracks of the previous installment in the series. And I took some key elements like the heavy usage of brass, the heavy usage of male choir and stuff like this, contrast, like, a sweeping orchestral passage and then all of a sudden, a very melancholic harp and stuff like this. So I took those elements, but not in terms of style, but rather in terms of instrumentation and vibes, and I implemented those in part of the new soundtrack.
Yeah, that's a sort of almost tactical choice, like wanting to pay homage.
But that's not all. So that's just the first part, and then I decided, okay, this is how I'm gonna approach part of the score. But there will be another part of the score which will be a completely new thing, something that nobody would expect. And I did, if you remember, I did an A/B. Basically, what I'm doing in the early access is A/B testing, more or less. I'm observing closely the reactions of the people, and I'm very happy to let you know, my friend, that the totally brave and completely new styles I introduced are the most well accepted.
That's so. All right, there's a lot to get into there, because I was going to say, there's a kind of optimism and an idealism in that approach and that way of thinking, where you basically say, I think that the best choice is going to be the thing that just serves the game best, and that the players will embrace it because it's the one that was made from the place of greatest honesty, the greatest kind of purity of intent. In a way, it kind of sounds like that's where you're coming from. Like this very, it's this very kind of belief that just the best will conquer. The cream will rise. That kind of thing.
But that's a Larian thing. Larian. This is very typical about the company. This is not the typical. I shouldn't say this, but Larian is a family, my friend. It's not a company. It's not a corporation. It's a big family. It's a big family where everybody's having fun. Everybody's ready instantly to support anyone else. It's a place with overflowing emotions, overflowing ideas, sharing responsibilities, sharing ideas, supporting one another. It's an unbelievable place. You should pay me a visit, but not just for
I would love a couple
of days. I invite you to my office in Ghent. It's a beautiful place, one of the most beautiful city. I'm gonna buy you the ticket if you decide to pay me a visit. But seriously, I need to show you so that you understand what I'm talking about.
How big is the studio now? How many people?
It's way bigger than it was during the development of Divinity Original Sin 2. If I'm not mistaken, back then we were like 150. Now we are, I think, 350 or so.
Wow, that's much bigger than I realized.
Well, yeah, but now we have several studios all over the globe, and it's not just the studio in Ghent, like it was Ghent and Dublin and St. Petersburg, and now we have a brand new studio in Malaysia. We have a studio in Canada. It's a big company, but the thing is that this company, that's very typical for this company. The people enjoy the process of creation. They truly enjoy it. And they not only enjoy it because they are very devoted and very passionate game developers, like most of the game developers out there, if not all, because I cannot imagine a game developer who is not passionate. But these people, they are very open-minded, they're very flexible, very supportive, and they prefer to, if there is a really brilliant and inspiring idea, even if it was put very late on the table, everybody will jump on it to support the bringer of the idea and to implement it properly, rather than saying, you know what, let's leave it for the next installment in the series, or we don't have the time, or it's too risky. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
These are people for whom the most important thing is to make sure that it's fun above everything else. And that's why you made me very happy when you shared your observation that it feels and looks like a classical video game, because it's about, a video game is supposed to be fun, to be a game in the first place, not a movie. It's a different type of mentality of game development. I hope you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. I mean,
the mentality in Larian Studios is, first and most important thing is that this needs to be fun, needs to be deep, needs to be, the player agency is the most important thing. The freedom in the world is the second most, or the same of importance, and we need to enjoy the process of creation if we want anyone else to have fun with the game when it's released. And the only way.
Well, I love that, because what I love about that is that there's no cynicism in that, meaning
absolutely no. It's not there.
Yeah, it's great. I love, because so often people have this idea of like, oh, well, it's kind of like the old Roman notion of give them games and give them bread. Like people need sort of a distraction, otherwise they will rise against you. And so a lot of game design, or there are certain, I shouldn't say a lot, but there are very often decisions that are made as a kind of defensive move, as opposed to saying, I believe that if we make something good, the players will find it, and I'm not going to try to be condescending, or I'm not going to try to quote stoop down or dumb down the game or the music for that matter, because players won't be able to understand it. Like if it's good,
it's good.
They will. Yeah, if it's good, it's good. And so, but that said, there's something that you kind of brushed past, which is really cool. And that I'm so glad you reminded me, because you brought it up in our Polish panel the other day, was during the early access on Baldur's Gate 3, you would create two different versions of like a boss battle or something, right? And let player feedback tell you which piece will be in the shipped game. Am I paraphrasing correctly?
Yeah, almost correctly. So what I decided to do is to implement several different styles of battle music. They all fit, and they all follow the narrative design and the situations, but the style is different. And
how would you describe those styles? Like what makes them different from each other?
Well, let's say that the first style is traditional. What you would expect from a let's say boss fight. Sweeping orchestral battle compositions, very similar to what you would expect to be there. The second one, for instance, is totally crazy, totally different instrumentation, a lot of psychoacoustic material, a lot of surprising elements, very eclectic is the word I was looking for. I'm gonna play for you this piece of music which I'm referencing, and I was really, really surprised, because we were making bets with my guys, and I was saying, you know what? I believe that everybody would go for the safe and the well-known traditional orchestral style, because the people would feel at home. It's going to be something that they love already, and that fits really well, and has proven his ability and quality to serve fight so well. But now, my friend, I was very, very pleasantly surprised that this is not the case, because I'm following the feedback, the forums, and everywhere, and the people are very, very, very happy with the most eclectic piece of music I've ever composed.
Did the folks at Larian also think that this would be the case? Like, did they think, oh, the fans and the players will probably go with the familiar, or did they say, oh, you're going to be wrong, they're going to like the more bold one?
Well, there are people who are thinking that the people would go more, both. I mean, there is no something like, everybody thinks the same way at Larian, and it's partially the beauty of it.
Yeah, sure.
But what is really important from my point of view is that now, when I observe, when I take the notes, reading the comments and the feedback which we receive on a daily basis, tons of feedback, the people truly like and love way better the eclectic and the new style than the traditional one.
How many pieces did you do this for? Like, how many different sort of moments in the game? Were there two different versions floating out there?
Quite a lot, actually, because I organized those in different packages. So I basically introduced at least, let me think, 4 different styles of battle music.
Across how many different battles? I'm just trying to get a sense of how much kind of extra music you wrote, basically.
That's really hard to tell you, my friend. I really don't know the number of the fights, but the thing is that we are not talking about 4 pieces of music. We're talking about 4 packages with music.
Yeah, exactly. That's it seems like a lot.
Every package of music has, let's say, 5 to 15 pieces. So that it's a lot. It's a huge amount of music. Might be funny for you to let you know that the early access of Baldur's Gate 3 has 5 hours of music produced.
Oh my god! And does that mean that all the if there were 4 different possibilities, and let's say option B really was clearly the favorite, does A, C, and D just go in the trash?
No, absolutely not, because the thing is that it still serves, supports, the people like it, but the thing is that the focus goes elsewhere now, and that makes me happy, because it proves and it shows that the people are open for new, brave, and innovative things.
But logistically, what do you do with it? What if it's not...
You're asking me what I'm going to do? No, this just gives me the confidence that I can just follow this balance between those different styles. So it's not like I'm going to... here's the thing. Option number 1, if the people were not happy with the new styles, I was going to drop those, of course. It goes without saying. But now that the people truly love and appreciate the new elements and the new styles in the music, what I'm going to do, I will just keep composing and producing music in this particular style along with the traditional one. I'm not going to drop anything.
Got it.
I was going to drop if it was the other way around, if the people were completely unhappy with the new elements that I was introducing.
Yeah, I see. I had the impression... Yeah. No, it makes total sense. I was under the impression that the score was basically done and that you kind of wrote extra and then we're just going to have to throw some stuff out. But it was actually like, as you went, you tested these waters.
Yes.
That's amazing. I absolutely love that. I would probably be very terrified to do that. But at the same time, it would be very valuable. I think that focus testing of the score is such a fascinating idea. Do players know?
You have no idea. I didn't need. You know what I did, by the way? I did something which was not exactly brave, because it was quite safe. If I must admit, I composed a song in a very musical style, but I did not implement it in a critically important place. I implemented it for a secondary, not so important NPC in the game, just because it was, imagine, I mean, typical musical song. And I was really wondering because we were having fun and we were having joke with this one, and everybody at Larian, and most importantly the producers, they were telling me, "What the fuck are you doing? I mean, this sounds like a musical, and it sounds like end credits of a Disney like movie or something like this. You're shooting a sparrow with a cannon and stuff like this." And I said, I'm just having fun. I would really love to see what the reaction is going to be here. And that's why I see no problem, because it's not like, a main character or something that if the people feel completely unhappy about it, it's going to be a big deal or, a big problem. And I'd say, let's give it a shot. Let's see what the people are going to do. And I implemented it for, a character, which now turns, the people start voting and start sending us requests that they would like Larian to make this a main character and one of the origin stories in the game because of the song. Everybody's freaking out because they fell in love with this song, which makes them feel totally at home. That now they would really like to make this companion, this NPC, a hireable and a recruitable is the right word in English for their party.
That's hilarious. So I guess that means it's an experiment that went well.
It's amazing, my friend, and that's why I keep repeating myself that Larian is a very, very special place. It's out of space and time.
Well, how did you first connect with them? Obviously, you were not there when we first met, and I never noticed sort of the exact moment where you made the switch and you moved to Belgium. Just out of curiosity, where did that connection come from?
Actually, it was a sad moment because I was Larian fan for many years. I was playing their games since the very beginning of the Divinity series, but I never applied for a job simply because I was truly in love with the work of the previous composer. And it simply made no sense for me to apply for a job where a legendary composer was already producing stuff that I was truly in love, along with the millions of fans. But sadly, the previous composer, his name is Kirill Pokrovsky, passed away and left us. And it was a very, very sad moment for everyone else. And the moment I read the news, it didn't cross my mind to apply for a job at Larian, because I was so very devastated. Because at that time I was playing the very first Divinity Original Sin game, which he scored. And 6 months later, for the very first time, this thought crossed my mind. I realized that Larian has no composer at the moment. And I said to myself, okay, I love this company. I love the games. I've been playing the games of this company for the past 15 years. And maybe it would make sense to get in contact with those guys and to offer them my heart and my skills. And this is exactly what I did. I got in contact, and I got an invitation to pay them a visit. I spent a few lovely days there. We instantly clicked with the team, which resulted in the relationship, and the rest is a history.
Wow, that obviously the on the back of it being a sad and tragic thing, that of course is well understood. But overall, what a remarkably kind of simple. It's like finding a soulmate by just randomly picking a city in the world, flying there, and they're waiting at the airport. You know what I mean? It feels like what an incredibly smooth transition by the sound of it.
Yes, that's why I told you, my friend, in the beginning of our conversations, that I consider myself the luckiest composer there.
Yeah, no kidding. I fully understand. It makes total sense. Well, there's something else that you mentioned that I wanted to just circle to, which was, you mentioned having students, and that was something I don't think I had any awareness of. Are you teaching in the midst of all of this as well? Or do you just mean things like master classes like when we were in Poland?
Well, both. I was guest lecturer in many different universities and festivals in Europe, and once in a while, I make some short courses on adaptive video game music because you know that this is another passion of mine. I love creating and designing music systems. This is maybe one of the biggest passion of mine.
Yeah, well,
When
I
it comes
relate.
to designing systems, and I truly find joy in sharing my knowledge, especially when a year or so later some of my students drop me an email and tells me, I work for this company already and this is my very first score and I just wanted to share it with you. And it's very touching because, as I told you already, I don't believe that the competition means that we should be very protective of our knowledge. The other way around, because when I speak with young people, they provoke me, and when I see a really brilliant idea, I feel very, provoked and on the alert that I cannot just sit down on my, but I need to keep developing myself. I need to keep trying to reinvent myself to find new ideas, new ground to cover, and new areas to explore. And going back to your question, I don't do this for a living, but I truly enjoy doing this. And once in a while, I get an invitation. And as a matter of fact, just yesterday, the director of the American Film Scoring Academy called me and invited me to give lectures.
Yeah, got it. I was going to say the idea of you grading papers and tests and managing the sort of simultaneous full-on career of an educator struck me as impossible given how hard I know you work. But that's just because we've had a similar path, I guess. I love doing those master classes and guest lectures and those kinds of things and helping students similarly, but I have to do it in waves because sometimes I say yes to too many of those. Like for example, when the COVID first hit and all these universities were doing their lectures over Zoom and suddenly were desperate for content that they hadn't really equipped for Zoom. I got like a million simultaneous guest lecture because doing it over Zoom meant, anyone anywhere could ask. And I said yes to practically all of them. And so I was like, I just became this full-time teacher for about a week and a half. And at some point I was like, okay, I got to stop saying it. I love doing it, but it's very demanding.
You should always find time to keep doing, my friend. You know why? Because the people love you, and it's very inspiring for the young composers. I'm telling you this. You should never, ever even consider stop doing this. Maybe if you're exhausted or you cannot find a lot of time to dedicate, but still, please.
I would never stop. I would never stop whole cloth. I just
this is important. This is important for the young guys, and I'm telling you because I've been reading comments about not only your music but about these master classes, and I always attended one of your talks, and it's very inspiring to the people, and that's why we should keep doing this. Because back then, at time when I was starting, I remember that it was very hard for me because I couldn't find a single person to listen to me, to give me an advice, to give me a hand, and to tell me something that is inspiring, reassuring, and encouraging. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And now when I talk to people like you, I believe that we should always find time to do this.
Well, all right. With your encouragement, I will not slow down my guest lecturing schedule. No, but I do totally agree. I just, my schedule kind of got out of balance, but I do in part, I suppose it's why I love doing this podcast.
But correct me if I'm mistaken, but tell me, do you feel very inspired and energized when you're giving the lectures to these young people?
enjoy best the Q&A because I love I learn a lot about their perspective, even from the questions they choose to ask.
Right.
And I try to use that moment, which is much more of a dialogue and not really this monologue of me just throwing information at them. But I like to try to cater my information towards wherever their concerns are, in the hopes that I might offer something that's useful to whatever they are thinking about, as opposed to just, here's what I think is important and I want you all to know it. My mind tends to wander, so I can talk about a lot of different subjects and not necessarily as an expert, but I'm curious by a lot of things, or about a lot of things. And so, I in fact, many times I'll show up for like a 2-hour masterclass or something with zero lecture prepared. And I'll just say, someone ask a question, because it can usually get like 20 minutes of discussion per question easily. So we just go, we just explore together. And I love, especially when I can have a laptop there and I'll go, I have no idea the answer to that. Let's group think, let's Google it and work it out together.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. I love it. And having long Q&A sessions is a clean indication of how much the people do enjoy and do love taking the time and discussing with you. Because if you don't have Q&A, or if you have just few questions, this is a disaster in my book. But
absolutely.
That's why I totally understand what you're saying, that this is the most pleasant and the most satisfactory part of any masterclass. When you sit down with these young fellow composers and they start shooting questions toward you, because they make us think, they make us feel, they make us stay alive, if you like. At least this is the way I feel. And at the end, I might feel exhausted physically, but emotionally, I'm totally charged.
I couldn't agree more. There's so many other things I would love to ask you, but that's such a beautiful note to bring this to a conclusion. And especially, it's what time is it even for you now? Is it like midnight or something?
Almost midnight. But seriously, my friend, I didn't even suspect that it was going to be such a pleasure talking to you.
Well, I love your outlook on these things, and I there's so many musical questions that I could ask, and we didn't even talk about things like your childhood and your background and all of that. But to me, it's one of those that you explode a kind of a positive attitude about just sort of trying to just do your best and make music that makes the world a better place, and it's so infectious. So I want to end on that beautiful sentiment, because you've made me want to go write my ass off and hopefully do some good work.
Yes, I think this is a pretty good ending line, my friend, and a pretty good open ending line, because I hope that's not going to be the last time we will be having such a pleasant conversation.
We will make a point of it, and I will gratefully reject your invitation to pay for my plane ticket. I will happily get my own and come spend some time in the forests outside of Ghent. So It sounds divine. Well, thank you again so much for doing this and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you so much, guys. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for the Game Maker's Notebook. For more information on the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, our podcasts, and our other initiatives, please visit www.interactive.org.